In our prior video, we built this purchase order schema by using a sample schema from the W3Org website here. And this is just an example purchase order that they had, and that's what we're going to be using in some of our demos today. So we built the schema. Now what can we do with it? So first of all, I want to show you several tools that are built into Visual Studio itself to create basically some fake or phony data, and then how do we validate data to make sure it really matches the schema. So the first thing you'll do is come over here, right click, and our first goal will be to generate dummy data. But before you say generate instance, you need to set up the name of the file that you want it to generate, and that's done by clicking on properties. But before we go there, what I typically do is I'll click here, and let me slide this over a little here. I then go down to the properties, and I'll copy the name of the path. Okay, so now I go up here and I right click properties, which is actually a different type of properties window, and here is the output instance file name, and then I'll paste the name of the file there, and then I'll take the XSD off, and I might put something like here instance1.xml, because you could have 5 or 10 instances. So I usually put a number on it, and then I'll put the XML suffix on the end. Okay, now it didn't generate it yet, we just set up the properties. So now you right click here and say generate instance. It runs the appropriate program to do that, and it says in the output box here, it actually gives you the name of the file that it generated, which by the way you can control and click that and it will open it. And there is our data. And so that's one way you can open it. I want to show you the other way. If you close it here, the file, since I said to store it in this directory, why don't we see it here? Well, there's two reasons. Number one is you'd have to click refresh, and number two is the file is actually not part of the project. So if you click this little button, it's called the Show All Files button, and when you click it, you can see things like the assembly info file are being displayed, the bin and object directories are now being displayed, and here's the name of our file. And you notice by the icon that it's not actually a member of our project. So it's optional whether you want to do this or not, but you can also say here right click include in project. And now that file will always be displayed even if you hide the non-project files. So that's one way you can get to the file. So now over here on the left we have the data. When I did the right click on it here, it opened it in sort of a browser window. So see, I can't change the data here. I can't overtype it. So if I close that and now I double click over here, it actually will open it in an editor where I can change the data. So by default what this program does, it always uses NS0 for namespace 0 prefix. And what that does is it ties it to right here. So they make XML namespace. This could be any word or number you wanted. It doesn't have to be NS0, but that's just what they do by default. Then if you have more than one namespace, the next one would be NS1, NS2, and so on. So here is the namespace that we specified earlier, and then here's our data. So by data, what it does, it takes the element name or the attribute name and it simply adds like a 0 after it. If it's a number such as quantity down here, I guess it sets it to 100, and if it's a decimal it sets it to 10.4. So we need to make this data a little bit prettier here. So our country is going to be US. Our order date is not quite that many years ago. I'll make it about a week ago. And then my name is John Doe Corporation. And then the street. I'm going to stop the video and just fill all this in because I don't think you want to watch me type. Okay, so far I just put in a little bit of data here, made up some John Doe 123 Main Street, and then they have a different shipping address. They have a warehouse in Garland, Texas they want to ship to. And now I'm going to enter the items, but before I do that, let's assume they order more than one line item. So I'm going to copy the item section and repeat it. So now, I don't know why it indented there. We now have 2 items on our order. Okay, so I've entered some data here, and one thing we might try is what if we don't put a comment on one of our items and we do put a comment on the other. And here we'll just put the word none. So now we have entered XML data in our XML sample file, and now we want to validate it to see if it's actually correct. So we go back to the schema, we go back to properties, and then here, just like there was an output file name, there's also an input file name. So I'm going to simply copy the input file name to the output file name to the input instance name, and I'm going to click OK, and then we're going to right click and say validate instance, and then down here it tells you whether it was successful or not. So it says here succeeded for schema so and so, and it just basically repeats the file name, and it was successful. So what if we want to copy this file and make a bad one now? So I did a right click copy, come up here and paste. And then let's rename this to purchase order instance 2. And let's just put the word bad there so we can remember what we're doing. And so here, if I, how can I mess this up? For instance, I could delete the bill to address. What if the company thought, well, I want to send it to the same place as my shipping, and I'm just not going to put in the bill to. And you notice already here the word comment has got a red, kind of a blue squiggly line under it, and that's because it's already recognizing that there's an error in the schema. Now let's make another mistake. Let's say quantity here was accidentally the letter A. And let's make maybe one more mistake. Let's make this not a date. Let's say they put in the date 05/11/2007. In other words, they used like a human date instead of the XML date format. Okay, so now to test this file, we'll have to go back to properties. We got to change the input file name here to 2_bad. Click OK. And then we want to do the right click here and validate again. So now you can see here it says component invocation succeeded, but it doesn't say the validation succeeded. So it looks like we have 3 lines of errors here. The first one says error, the order date attribute is invalid. The value 5/11/2007 is invalid according to its data type, and it refers you to the W3 schema date format. The string 0511 is not a valid XSD date time value. So that's a pretty clear message. The second one then says purchase order has an invalid child element comment. Now this one's a little trickier because we know comment is actually valid. It says a list of possible elements includes bill to. So what it's really trying to tell you here, it'd be nice if it was better English, that it would just say, hey dummy, you forgot to put the bill to address in your schema. And then the third error is, well, that's the only 2 I see. The final one is just telling you the whole thing failed. The schema is not valid. So it doesn't look like it actually complained about the quantity. So now we'll fix a couple of things. We'll go back to 2007 11/05, and we'll take the ship to copy and just change it back to bill to here. And then we will test it again. Right click, validate instance. And this time it did tell us the quantity element is invalid. The value A is invalid according to the data type so and so. So that's how you basically test data to see if it works. We'll do one more experiment here. We'll copy this again, paste it, rename it. So we'll call this purchase order instance 3 from the web. And I want to open it. I'm just going to erase the whole thing, and I'm going to go back to that website, and I want to copy in their data. So sometimes you get data from another company and you want to test it and see if it works. So now we save that. I'm going to copy this file name by doing rename and copy. I'm going to go to the schema properties, go to the instance, and just change the last part here by pasting that file name there, instance 03 underscore web. Click here, and then we're going to validate again. Go to the output window. Aha. So the biggest mistake here is the data on their website does not have any namespace on it. So right here, it's having trouble matching even the first element to our schema. So again, this is sort of the way BizTalk likes to work. You don't have to do it this way. So we have two choices. We could actually come back here to our schema, and let's just try this. We could actually remove the target namespace. Okay, and then let's go back and validate it now. So anyway, it looks like there's a couple other little issues, but that's one way to do it. But the way that I like to start getting into BizTalk is the way BizTalk, likes to do things. So if it wants the namespace here, let's put the namespace in the data. And so if you're working with a trading partner, what you're going to do is ask them to put here the clause XML namespace, and then I'm sorry, let me actually just open one of these others. Let's open this one. Okay, so remember what they did? They put the namespace 0, and then they put this name right here, XML namespace 0. So we're going to copy that in here. Let's move the order date back over here. Now the only thing we have to do is we have to add that in as 0 at the top on the first element, and at the very bottom on the closing element. Okay, now we're going to validate it again. And looks like we have one problem still. There's a slash, there's an unexpected token. Line 18, position 33. So at least it was very specific where it is. So at the bottom of my screen here, you can see the line number. So when I move my cursor down, we go to line 18, and then look over to 33. And that's bizarre. Let me just check something here. So yeah, they actually had the exclamation point in the wrong place there on our sample data. So let's take the exclamation point and stick it there, and then let's validate again. Sorry, you got to click the XSD, not the XML. Validate instance. Go to the output window. And we have one problem still left. It says the ship date is not good. So if we go back up here, where do we even have ship date in here? I didn't know we had a ship date. This is back to this. List of possible elements expected is comment. So it's actually looking for a comment. Invalid child element ship date. There's the ship date. So what it's saying is we don't have a comment in our second item. So what we would need to do is go back to our schema and see if comments are optional or not. I put here minimum occurs 1. So that means we shouldn't have to have a comment at all. But the catch is, you notice there is no ship date here. So when I was looking at this, you notice item 1 did not have a ship date. So I didn't notice that item 2 did have a ship date. So we have another field called ship date, which is apparently an optional field because one item has it and one item does not. So now we come back here, insert child element, ship date, and we'll make sure that it's a legal date field. And then we will make it optional by saying max occurs 1, minimum occurs 0. Save the schema and then right click Validate Instance. This time it says it was successful, so now our data from the website does match our schema, and therefore that concludes this video.